wind howled through Pine Hollow, a small Colorado mountain town buried under a fresh blanket of snow. Jake Miller stood at the top of a secret slope, his breath fogging in the icy air. The old skis of his dad Tom Miller strapped tight to his boots. The wood was scratched and faded, but the name Tom, carved into the edge, still gleamed under his flashlight. Below, Ray Carter waved him on, his gruff voice cutting through the storm. "Go, kid, go. You've got this." Jake's heart pounded like a drum solo at a high school pep rally. He pushed off, the skis slicing through the powder, wind screaming past his ears. For a second, he was flying free, alive, like his dad must have felt tearing down these same mountains years ago. The slope dipped sharper, and he leaned into it, knees bent, eyes locked ahead, just like Ray had taught him. Snow sprayed around him, a white blur against the black pines. He hit the bottom, skidding to a stop with a whoop that echoed off the cliffs. Ray clapped, his gloved hands muffled in the storm. "Hell yeah, kid. That's your old man in you." But then headlights stabbed through the darkness, a black SUV roaring up the trail. Jake froze, chest heaving, as the driver's door flew open. His mom, Maggie Miller, stumbled out into the snow, her coat flapping loose, face pale as the drifts around them. "Jake, get in the car now," she yelled, her voice cracking like a snapped twig. She charged toward him, boots crunching, and grabbed his arm so hard he dropped the flashlight. It rolled into the snow, flickering out. "Mom, what the?" Jake started, but she cut him off, yanking him toward the car. Ray stepped forward, hands up like he was calming a spooked horse. "Maggie, he's good at this. Tom's alive in him out there." "Shut up, Ray." Maggie spun on him, her eyes wild, snowflakes catching in her dark hair. "You're dragging him to his grave, just like you did Tom." Her words hung heavy, sharper than the wind. Jake stumbled back, the skis tangling under him, and he hit the ground hard, cold seeping through his jeans. "Mom, I just want to feel something," he shouted, voice raw, shoving himself up. "You can't keep me locked in that damn house forever." Maggie's face twisted anger, fear, something deeper, and for a split second, Jake swore he saw tears before she blinked them away. "Get in the car," she said again, quieter now, but it wasn't a request. The SUV's engine rumbled, exhaust curling into the night. Jake glared at her, then at Ray, who just stood there, shoulders slumped like a man who lost a fight he didn't want to win. As Jake climbed into the back seat, slamming the door, he caught a glimpse of something, a shadow on the ridge above, tall and still, watching. His dad? No way. Just the storm playing tricks. Maggie slid behind the wheel, hands trembling on the keys. The car lurched forward, tires spinning in the snow, and Pine Hollow swallowed them back into its quiet, frozen grip. What do you think Maggie's hiding? Drop your guesses in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. The morning after the storm broke over Pine Hollow like a fever dream. A heavy silence settled over the little Colorado mountain town. Snowdrifts piled high against the wooden houses, muffling the usual hum of life, pickup trucks rumbling down Main Street, kids hollering as they sled past the old gas station, the faint clang of the diner's breakfast bell. Jake Miller barely noticed. He sat cross-legged on the edge of his bed, the springs creaking under his wiry frame, staring at the locked closet door where his mom had stashed his dad's skis last night. The room smelled like pine from the cracked window, where a sliver of cold air slipped through, carrying the sharp bite of winter. Downstairs, the faint clatter of pots and pans echoed up through the floorboards. Maggie, his mom, was at it again, probably stressed, cooking her famous chili, the kind she'd make whenever she was mad or scared or both. He could hear her muttering under her breath, sharp little snippets like, "damn fools" and "damn mountains," and it twisted his gut into knots. She hadn't said a single word to him since she dragged him off that slope, just marched into the house, locked those skis away, and left him stewing in the quiet. The quiet was the worst part. It wasn't the kind of quiet that felt peaceful, like the hush after a fresh snowfall. It was thick, heavy, like the air was holding its breath, waiting for something to snap. Jake's bedroom was a time capsule, posters of snowboarders peeling off the walls, a beat-up skateboard propped in the corner, a shelf of dusty trophies from Pee Wee hockey he'd quit years ago. But the real relic was on the mantel downstairs. A photo of his dad, Tom Miller, grinning wide, mid-laugh, standing on a snowy ridge with a medal slung around his neck. Dark hair, sharp jaw, eyes that sparkled like he knew something the rest of the world didn't. Jake hadn't looked at that picture in months, couldn't but last night, sliding down that slope, he felt him. Not just a memory, but a presence, like Tom was out there in the wind, pushing him forward. He couldn't sit still anymore. His socks slid on the hardwood as he crept downstairs, past the living room where the photo stared at him from the mantel. Maggie's voice drifted from the kitchen, low and tense, talking to herself, or maybe the chili pot. Should we burned those damn things years ago? Jake's chest tightened. He slipped into the garage through the side door, the cold concrete biting through his socks, and flicked on the bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. It buzzed to life, casting a weak yellow glow over the clutter boxes of tangled Christmas lights, a snow shovel with a cracked handle, his old hockey gear shoved into a corner. The air smelled like motor oil and damp wood, and a faint draft whistled through the cracked window pane. He started digging, shoving aside a crate of rusty tools, kicking over a stack of flattened, moving boxes from when they'd come back to Pine Hollow after his dad died. Then he saw a dusty blue tarp crumpled in the far corner, half buried under a pile of old blankets. His heart skipped. He yanked the tarp back, and there they were. Tom's skis, scratched and weathered, the wood chipped along the edges but still solid, leaning against the wall like they'd been waiting for him all this time. His fingers brushed the surface, tracing the carved Tom Miller etched into the side, the letters rough under his touch. These weren't just skis, they were a piece of his dad, a lifeline to the man he barely remembered outside of stories and that damn photo. Something fluttered out from under the bindings, a crumpled scrap of paper hitting the floor with a whisper. Jake snatched it up, unfolding it with shaky hands. The ink was faded, smudged at the edges, but he could make out his dad's handwriting, sharp, sloppy, like he'd scribbled it in a panic. "The ridge isn't safe, tell Maggie." Jake's breath caught. What ridge? The one behind town? The one where Tom had died in that avalanche all those years ago? And why tell Maggie? She already knew he was gone, everyone did. Pine Hollow still whispered about it sometimes, late at night in the diner or around bonfires, the story of Tom Miller, the local legend who skied like he owned the mountains until they took him back. Jake stuffed the note into his jeans pocket, his mind racing. He didn't know what it meant, but it was something his mom didn't want him to find. He grabbed the skis, the weight familiar now after last night, and slipped out the back door before Maggie could catch him. The snow crunched under his boots as he trudged through the yard, past the skeletal apple tree his dad had planted when Jake was a baby, its branches bowing under the fresh powder. The pines loomed ahead, dark and silent, their needles drooping with snow. He followed the faint trail behind the house, the one he'd taken 100 times as a kid, ducking under low branches until he spotted Ray's beat-up Chevy truck parked at the edge of the woods. Exhaust puffed from the tailpipe like dragoness breath, curling into the crisp morning air. Ray climbed out, thermos in one hand, a wool cap pulled low over his graying hair. He squinted at Jake, then at the skis slung over the kid's shoulder, and gave a slow nod. "Figured you'd show up sooner or later. Your mom locked those things up tight." "She tried," Jake said, shifting the skis to the ground. "Threw 'em in the closet like they're cursed or something. But I'm not letting her bury Dad again, Ray. Not this time." Ray chuckled, a low, gravelly sound that rumbled in his chest, and took a swig from his thermos. The smell of burnt coffee hit Jake's nose, mixing with the sharp tang of pine and snow. "She's a tough one, your mom. Always was. Simon, let us get you moving before she sends the sheriff after us." He led Jake up a narrow trail snaking through the trees, boots crunching a path through the drifts. The woods opened into a small clearing, a hidden slope, steep but short, dropping into a bowl of untouched powder that sparkled under the pale sunlight filtering through the clouds. "This spot's off the map," Ray said, planting his boots at the top. Me and your dad used to tear it up back in the day, no crowds, no rules, just us and the snow. Best runs were under a full moon, back when Pine Hollow still threw those midnight races. Tom won every damn one. Jake's throat tightened at the thought his dad, young and fearless, carving through the night while the town cheered. He strapped on the skis, the bindings creaking as he clicked them into place, and adjusted his stance. The air was sharp, cold enough to sting his lungs, but it felt good clean, like a reset. Ray stepped back, folding his arms. Start here, kid. Keep your weight forward, knees bent like you're dancing with the hill, not fighting it. Cut the snow like you're carving a turkey at Thanksgiving. Tom always said it's about feeling the mountain, letting it guide you. Jake nodded, gripping the poles Ray had handed him, old, scratched metal ones with chipped grips. He took a deep breath, the cold biting his nose, and pushed off. The skis wobbled at first, heavier than the cheap rentals he messed with at school, and he nearly tipped over as the slope dipped. But then he found it, the rhythm. His knees flexed, hips shifted, and he glided down, snow spraying around him in a wild, messy arc. The wind whistled past, tugging at his hoodie, and for a second, he wasn't just Jake Miller. The quiet kid who hid in the back of class. He was alive, unstoppable, like his dad must have been. Halfway down, he hit a bump, his balance faltered, and he ate it hard face first into the powder, legs tangled, poles flying. Snow packed into his collar, ice stinging his cheeks, but he couldn't stop grinning. Ray's laugh boomed from the top, echoing off the trees. That's it, kid. Shake it off and go again. First wipeout is a rite of passage. Your dad took plenty before he owned these hills. Jake spat out a mouthful of snow, still smiling, and hauled himself up, brushing the flakes from his jeans. His hands were numb, his face burned from the cold, but none of it mattered. Out here, with the skis under him and Ray's voice in his ears, he felt something spark, something his mom couldn't lock away, something bigger than Pine Hollow's whispers. He didn't know what his dad's note meant, or why Maggie was so hell-bent on keeping him off the mountain, but right now it didn't matter. This was his shot, his piece of Tom, and he wasn't letting it go. The sun climbed higher over Pine Hollow, its pale light filtering through the thick canopy of pines, casting long, jagged shadows across the hidden slope where Jake Miller stood, catching his breath. Snow clung to his hoodie, damp patches spreading across the faded gray fabric, and his cheeks burned red from the cold and the rush of that first real run. He wiped out twice more since that initial tumble, once catching an edge and flipping sideways into a drift, the other time overshooting the bottom and skidding into a tangle of frozen brush, but each time, he hauled himself up, grinning like a fool, adrenaline pumping so hard he could feel it in his teeth. Ray Carter watched from the top, arms crossed, his wool cap pulled low over his weathered face, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. The old man's thermos sat steaming in the snow beside him, the sharp scent of coffee cutting through the crisp, pine-heavy air. "All right, kid," Ray called down, his voice rough but warm, like a gravel road after rain. "You're getting the hang of it. Now let us see you stick the landing. Don't go plowing into the trees like some rookie snowboarder. Your dad never let me hear the end of it if I let you bust your head open on my watch." He chuckled, the sound echoing faintly off the cliffs that loomed in the distance, their peaks shrouded in a haze of storm clouds that hadn't quite burned off from last night. Jake nodded, brushing snow from his jeans, and planted his poles into the powder. His legs ached already, a dull throb settling into his calves, but he didn't care. Out here, with the skis under him and Ray's gruff encouragement ringing in his ears, he felt something he hadn't in years, something alive. Something that wasn't just the dull ache of missing his dad or the suffocating weight of his mama's rules. He glanced up at Ray, then back at the slope, a gentle curve of white that dropped into the bowl below, flanked by dark pines standing like silent sentinels. The snow sparkled under the sun, untouched except for the messy tracks he carved on his earlier runs, and for a moment, he swore he heard a whisper in the wind, a low, fleeting murmur, like someone saying, "Keep going." He shook his head, chalking it up to the cold playing tricks, and pushed off again. This time he nailed it. The skis hummed beneath him, cutting clean lines through the powder as he leaned into the turn, weight forward, knees bent just like Ray had said. The wind roared past, tugging at his hood, snow spraying in wild arcs around him like he was some kind of winter superhero. He could feel the mountain under him, alive and shifting, guiding him down the slope in a way he couldn't explain, like it knew him, like it remembered his dad. Halfway down, he hit a small rise, launched into the air for a split second, and landed smooth, skis slapping the snow with a satisfying thud. He whooped, loud and raw, the sound bouncing off the trees as he skidded to a stop at the bottom, kicking up a cloud of white that glittered in the sunlight. Ray clapped from the top, slow and deliberate, his gloves muffling the sound. "Hell yeah, kid," he shouted, his voice carrying down the hill. "That's the stuff. You've got your old man-'s fire in you, no doubt about it. Tom D be up there grinning like a damn fool right now, probably would V dragged you out for a midnight run under the moon just to celebrate." He paused, his smirk fading a little, eyes drifting to the ridge in the distance. "He was the best, Jake. Could V gone pro if he D wanted hell. He beat me every damn time we raced back in the day, and I wasn't no slouch." Jake's chest swelled, a mix of pride and something sharper, something that stung. He trudged back up the slope, skis slung over his shoulder, the snow crunching under his boots with every step. His breath puffed out in white clouds, and the cold bit deeper now, seeping through his damp clothes, but he barely noticed. What was he like out here? He asked, reaching the top and dropping the skis beside Ray. "Like, really like? Mom never talks about it, any of it. Just shuts down whenever I bring him up." Ray uncapped his thermos, pouring a stream of steaming coffee into the lid, the bitter smell mixing with the pine and snow. He took a sip, staring out at the slope like he could see Tom tearing down it, then handed the lid to Jake. "Here, warm up. You're shivering like a wet dog." Jake took it, the heat seeping into his numb fingers, and waited. Ray sighed, scratching at the stubble on his jaw. Tom was hell, he was a force. Fearless, but not stupid, knew every inch of these mountains like they were his backyard. Loved the rush, you know? The way the wind hits you, the way the snow gives under your skis. He dragged me out here after every big storm, just the two of us, racing till our legs gave out. Folks in Pine Hollow used to call him the king of the ridge. One every midnight run we threw back when I was your age. Full moon lighting up the snow, bonfires roaring down at the base, half the town out there whooping and hollering. Best nights of my life. Jake sipped the coffee, wincing at the bitter kick, and handed it back. "Sounds like he was a legend," he said, voice quiet. "Why did he stop? Why did he stay here instead of going big?" Reyes' eyes darkened, just for a second, before he shrugged it off. "Life, kid. Got married, had you? Mountains were enough for him, he didn't need the spotlight. Plus, Pine Hollow's got a pull, gets in your blood. Keeps you here. He didn't mention the avalanche, didn't need to." Jake could feel it hanging there, unspoken, heavy as the snow piling up around them. He wanted to ask about the note, the ridge isn't safe, but something in Reyes' face stopped him. A flicker of something guarded, something old. "Let us go again," Jake said instead, strapping the skis back on. He wanted that rush again, that feeling of flying, of being close to his dad. Ray nodded, stepping back, and Jake launched down the slope once more. Faster this time, more sure. The wind screamed in his ears, the trees blurring past, and he nailed the landing again, skidding to a stop with a shout of pure, wild joy. He was panting, grinning, ready to climb back up when he heard it. Tires crunching snow, car door slamming. Then his mom's voice, sharp and furious, cutting through the clearing like a knife. "Jake Miller? What the hell are you doing?" He spun around, heart dropping, and saw her storming up the trail from the woods, her boots sinking into the drifts, coat flapping open despite the cold. Maggie's face was a storm of its own, pale, pinched, her dark hair tangled from the wind, eyes wide with something that wasn't just anger. Fear, maybe. Panic. Behind her, the beat-up station wagon she'd driven since Jake was a kid sat crooked on the path, exhaust curling into the air. She must come straight from the house, spotted him gone, and tracked him here. How did she even know where to look? Mom, Jake started, but she was already on him, grabbing his arm and yanking him off the skis so hard he stumbled. The poles clattered to the ground, half buried in the snow. No more slopes, no more Ray, no more of this. She snapped, her voice shaking, louder than the wind now. You hear me? You're done. She turned on Ray, who started down the hill toward them, his boots slow and deliberate. And you're turning him into Tom, and I won bury another Miller because of you. You stay the hell away from my son, Ray Carter, or I swear I'll. Maggie, calm down. Ray cut in, hands up like he was facing a grizzly. He's good at this, damn good. Thomas alive and him out here. Don't you see that? You can't keep him locked up forever. Shut up. Maggie's voice cracked, raw and ragged. And Jake saw it then, tears, real ones, glistening in her eyes before she blinked them back. You don't get to tell me how to raise my kid. You don't get to drag him into this death trap just because you miss Tom. He's not Tom, Ray. He's Jake. And he's all I've got left. She was trembling now, her grip on Jake's arm tightening, and he could feel the heat of her hand through his sleeve, even through the cold. Jake yanked free, stumbling back a step, snow crunching under his boots. Mom, stop it, he shouted, his own voice breaking. I'm not some baby you can chain to the house. I want to be out here, I want to feel Dad. Not just sit around missing him. Why won't you let me have this? His chest heaved, the words spilling out like they'd been bottled up too long. And for a second, the clearing went silent, just the wind, the creak of the pines, the faint hum of the station wagon's engine down the trail. Maggie stared at him, her face crumpling, and Jake thought she might say something real. Something about why she was so scared, but then her jaw tightened, and she shook her head. Get in the car, she said, low and final, pointing toward the trail. Now. Jake glared at her, then at Ray, who just stood there, hands shoved in his pockets, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. This ain't over, Jake muttered, kicking off the skis and stomping past his mom toward the car. The slope loomed behind him, quiet now, but he could still feel it, the fire, the fight, the piece of his dad he'd found out there. Maggie followed, her steps heavy, and as Jake climbed into the back seat, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows, he caught another glimpse of that shadow on the ridge just for a heartbeat, tall and still, watching them go. Jake's flying, but Maggie's grounding him. What's next? Comment and hit that bell. The station wagon rattled down the snowy backroads of Pine Hollow, its worn tires crunching through the fresh powder as Maggie Miller gripped the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping her upright. The heater blasted lukewarm air, rattling the vents, but it did little to chase the chill that had settled into the car or into her bones. Jake slouched in the back seat, arms crossed tight over his damp hoodie, staring out the window at the blur of pines whipping past. His breath fogged the glass in short, angry bursts, and every few seconds, he'd shift, the squeak of the vinyl seat cutting through the tense silence like a knife. Maggie's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, catching his glare for a split second before she snapped them back to the road. Her knuckles whitened on the wheel, her dark hair falling loose from its messy bun, strands sticking to her flushed cheeks. She hadn't said a word since they'd left the slope, and neither had he, but the air between them crackled with everything unsaid: anger, hurt, and something heavier, something she couldn't name but felt like a stone in her chest. Outside, Pine Hollow unfolded in its quiet, winter-wrapped way. The town was small, barely a blip on the Colorado map: wooden houses with sagging porches, smoke curling from chimneys, pickup trucks parked haphazardly along the narrow streets. The diner's neon sign flickered in the distance, promising hot coffee and gossip, while the old gas station sat squat and rusty at the edge of town, its pumps half buried in snow. Beyond it all, the mountains loomed, their peaks jagged against the gray sky, a constant reminder of what they'd taken from her. Tom, her husband, Jake's dad, the man who loved those slopes more than anything until they swallowed him whole in that avalanche 10 years ago. She could still see it sometimes, late at night when the house creaked and the wind howled the wall of white roaring down. His scream cut short, the empty space where he should come home. And now Jake, her Jake, was chasing that same ghost. Those same damn skis carving a path she couldn't stop. The car jolted over a pothole, and Jake muttered something under his breath too low to catch, but sharp enough to sting. Maggie's jaw tightened. She wanted to turn around, to yell at him, to shake him until he understood why she was so scared, why every scrape of those skis on snow sounded like a countdown to losing him too. But she couldn't. Not without cracking open the vault she'd locked tight all these years. The one full of secrets she'd sworn to bury with Tom. Secrets about the ridge. About Victor Slade. About the money that kept her in this town, in this life, when she should run far and fast after that avalanche took everything. They pulled into the driveway of their house, a modest 2-story cabin. All weathered logs and steep eaves. The kind of place that looked cozy from the outside, but felt like a cage to Jake. Snow piled high against the porch. The apple tree in the yard bowing under the weight of last night's storm. Maggie killed the engine, the sudden quiet deafening, and sat there for a moment, hands still on the wheel, staring at the windshield as snowflakes tapped against it like tiny fists. Jake didn't wait. He shoved the door open, cold air rushing in, and stomped toward the house, his boots leaving deep prints in the drift. She watched him go, her throat tight, and whispered to herself, "I'm trying, kid. I'm trying so damn hard." Inside, the house smelled like chili and wood smoke, the pot simmering on the stove where she'd left it before she'd bolted out to find him. Jake kicked off his boots by the door, snow scattering across the hardwood, and headed straight upstairs without a word. The slam of his bedroom door echoed down, sharp and final, and Maggie flinched, her hands curling into fists. She crossed to the kitchen, grabbed a ladle, and stirred the chili absently, the steam rising in thick curls, the spicy tang of cumin and tomatoes filling the air. But her mind wasn't on dinner. It was back on that slope, with Reyes' voice and Jake's shout and the skis that shouldn't have been anywhere near her son. She'd locked them in the closet last night, double-checked the latch, but he'd gotten them anyway. Stubborn, just like Tom. Too much like Tom. Her phone buzzed on the counter, a low, insistent hum that made her stomach drop. She didn't want to look knew who it was before she even flipped it over, but she couldn't ignore it. Not him. The screen glowed with a single text from an unlisted number. "Slopes are off limits, Maggie." Or the kid's next. Victor Slade's words, cold and clipped, even through a screen. Her breath hitched, the ladle slipping from her hand and clattering into the pot, splattering red across the stove. She grabbed the phone, thumbs trembling as she typed back. "He won't go again. I'll make sure." But her hands shook so hard she could barely hit send. And when the reply came, "Better hope so. You know what happens when you slip." She dropped the phone like it burned, pressing her palms to her eyes as if she could block it all out. Victor wasn't just a ghost from her past. He was a chain around her neck, one she'd worn since the day Tom died. She'd been naive back then, grieving and desperate, when he'd swooped in with his slick suits and promises of security. A business partner, he'd called himself, turning her small inheritance into a fortune. She didn't understand mining deals, land grabs, investments she'd signed without reading. By the time she realized what he really was, a crooked official with mafia ties, a man who'd orchestrated that avalanche to cover his tracks, it was too late. He owned her, the money, the house, the life she'd built for Jake. It all came from him, and he never let her forget it. One wrong move and he'd take it all away. Or worse, Jake, her boy, the only thing keeping her sane. She crossed to the living room, sinking into the worn couch, the springs groaning under her weight. The photo of Tom stared at her from the mantel, his grin mocking her, now fearless, reckless, gone. She'd loved that about him once, the way he'd light up on those slopes, the way he'd scoop Jake up as a toddler and spin him around in the snow until they both collapsed laughing. But that was before the ridge took him, before Victor turned her into a puppet, before every creak in this house sounded like his boots coming to collect. She buried her face in her hands, the tears she'd held back on the slope spilling out now, hot and silent, soaking into her sleeves. Upstairs, Jake paced his room, the hardwood creaking under his socks. He'd heard the phone buzz, caught the clatter of the ladle, but he didn't care, not about her chili, not about her rules. He yanked the note from his pocket, smoothing it out on his desk under the dim glow of his lamp. The Ridge isn't safe, tell Maggie. What the hell did it mean? Was it about the avalanche? Something else? He asked Ray about his dad out there, but the old man had dodged it, same as always, focus on the slope. Kid. Past a slippery thing. Slippery? Sure. But Jake wasn't letting it slide. Not anymore. He grabbed a screwdriver from his drawer, the one he used to fix his skateboard last summer, and crept downstairs, past the kitchen where Maggie was still hunched over the counter, her back to him. The closet was off the hallway, a narrow door with a cheap lock she slapped on last night. He knelt, working the screwdriver into the latch, his hands steady despite the pounding in his chest. It popped open with a soft click, and there they were, Thomas skis, propped against the wall, the carved name catching the light from the hall. He pulled them out, the wood cool under his fingers, and slipped back upstairs before she could hear. Back in his room, he stashed them under his bed, the note tucked into his hoodie pocket. She could lock him out of the slopes, all she wanted, he'd find a way back. For him, for Dad. Downstairs, Maggie's phone buzzed again, and she flinched, snatching it up. Another text. Heard the kid's got talent. Keep him off my mountain, or I'll bury him myself. Her hands shook, the screen blurring through tears, and she whispered into the empty kitchen. I won't let you take him, you bastard. I won't. But the words felt hollow, drowned out by the wind rattling the windows. A wind that carried a whisper she couldn't hear, a shadow of Tom, watching from the ridge, waiting for the truth to break free. Meanwhile, across town, Tina Hayes leaned against the counter at the diner, wiping down the sticky laminate with a rag that smelled like bleach and old grease. She'd seen Jake out there today, tearing down that slope like he owned it, and it burned her up inside. She'd been skiing since she could walk crappy hand-me-down gear, sure, but she was good, damn good, and here was this rich kid, new to the game, already turning heads. She'd heard the whispers about the Miller's money out of nowhere, Maggie's fancy car that didn't match their beat-up house. Something was off, and Tina wasn't the type to let it slide. She tossed the rag into the sink, her jaw tight, and muttered to herself, let us see what you're hiding, Miller. Secrets are piling up, who's pulling the strings? Drop your theories below. The next few days in Pine Hollow unfolded under a sky that couldn't decide whether to clear or dump. More snow-gray clouds hung low, spitting flurries that dusted the town in a thin, restless shimmer. Jake Miller kept his head down at school, dodging the usual monotony of algebra and cafeteria meatloaf, his mind stuck on the slope, the skis under his bed, and that cryptic note from his dad. The Ridge isn't safe, tell Maggie. He replayed it 100 times, tracing the jagged handwriting in his head, but it still didn't add up. The Ridge was where Tom had died, everyone knew that. A freak avalanche that turned a sunny Saturday into a town-wide funeral. So why the warning? What wasn't safe? And why tell Maggie, who acted like the mountains were a curse she could outrun if she just locked enough doors? He didn't have time to figure it out, not yet. Friday night was creeping up, and with it, the Pine Hollow Amateur Slalom, a scrappy little race the town threw every winter down at Timberline Hill. It wasn't fancy, no Olympic scouts, no big prizes, just a rickety wooden start gate, a couple dozen locals with duct-taped gear, and a bonfire at the finish line where folks drank cheap beer and swapped stories. Jake had heard about it for years, kids at school bragging about their runs, but he'd never gone. Maggie always had some excuse, some chore to keep him home. This time, though, he wasn't asking. He overheard Ray at the hardware store yesterday, grumbling about fixing the gate for the race, and when the old man caught Jake's eye, he winked. You in, kid? Ray had asked, low enough that the cashier didn't hear. Jake had nodded, quick and sharp, before bolting out with a bag of nails he didn't need. Now it was Friday afternoon, and Pine Hollow buzzed with a low-grade fever. Pickup trucks lined the road to Timberline, their tailgates piled with skis and snowboards, kids spilling out in mismatched jackets, their laughter cutting through the crisp air. The hill wasn't much steep enough to count, but short, flanked by pines and strung with faded orange netting that flapped in the wind. A crowd was already gathering at the base, boots stomping a patchy circle in the snow around the bonfire, the smell of burning pine and hot dogs drifting up in thick, smoky curls. Jake slipped out of the house while Maggie was on the phone some tense call. Her voice clipped and hushed and hiked the half-mile to the hill, Thomas skis slung over his shoulder, hood pulled low to dodge any nosy neighbors. He found Ray near the start gate, the old man wrestling with a wobbly plank, a toolbox spilled open at his feet. The gate was a mess splintered wood, rusty hinges, but Ray had it standing, sort of, by the time Jake dropped his skis in the snow. "Thought you might chicken out," Ray said, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cold, his breath puffing white. "Your mom de-skinned me alive if she knew you were here." "She doesn't," Jake said, kicking at the snow. "And she's not gonna. I'm doing this, Ray, for Dad." He adjusted the skis, the bindings creaking as he clicked them on, the carved Tom Miller catching the last of the daylight. Ray studied him for a second, then nodded, clapping a gloved hand on his shoulder. "All right, kid. You're up third. Keep it tight, short turns, don't overshoot the flags. And don't wipe out in front of Tina Hayes, she's been ruling this thing since she was 12. Ray smirked, pointing down the hill where Tina was warming up, her patched-up skis cutting sharp lines in the practice snow. She was all lean muscle and attitude, her dark braids swinging as she carved a turn, her eyes flicking up to Jake with a glare that could melt ice. Jake swallowed, his stomach flipping, but he shook it off. He wasn't here to impress her, he was here for himself. The race kicked off with a shout from Old Man Hayes, Tina's grandpa, who stood at the gate with a megaphone that crackled like a bad radio. First up, Bobby Klein, a lanky kid in a Broncos hoodie, shoved off, wobbling through the flags, and the crowd cheered as he skidded to a stop at the bottom, barely upright. Next was a girl with neon pink goggles who took the turns too wide and plowed into the netting, laughing as she disentangled herself. Then it was Jake's turn. Ray gave him a nudge. "Go get 'em, kid. Show 'em what a Miller can do." Jake stepped up to the gate, the wind tugging at his hoodie, snowflakes stinging his cheeks. The hill stretched out below, steeper than it looked, the red flags fluttering like warning signs, the bonfire a hazy glow at the base. His heart hammered, loud enough to drown out the crowd's chatter, and for a second he froze, the weight of the skis pulling him back. Then Old Man Hayes barked, "Go!" and Jake pushed off. The world narrowed to a rush of white and wind. He leaned into the first turn, skis biting the snow, cutting tight around the flag like Ray had said. The crowd blurred into a roar, shouts, whistles, a kid yelling, "Holy crap, he's fast." But Jake barely heard it. He was flying, the slope alive under him, every shift of his weight a dance with the mountain. The second flag loomed, and he carved hard, snow spraying in a wild arc, his knees flexing to absorb the jolt. He hit a patch of ice halfway down, wobbled, arms flailing, but he dug in with his poles and straightened out, adrenaline surging like fire in his veins. The last turn came fast, too fast, and he overshot it, skidding wide, but he recovered, blasting through the finish line with a shout that tore from his chest. The skis hissed to a stop, kicking up a cloud of powder, and he stood there, panting, grinning, as the crowd erupted. "Hell of a run, Miller," someone yelled, a guy in a flannel jacket, cracking open a beer. Kids swarmed the base, phones out, filming the chaos, and Jake caught snippets of chatter. "Who's that kid? Did you see that speed?" Before Ray trudged down, clapping him on the back so hard he nearly fell over. "That's my boy," Ray said, grinning wide. "Thomas gotta be laughing his ass off up there right now." Jake's chest swelled, the cold forgotten, the ache in his legs drowned out by the high of it all. He'd done it, really done it, and for a second, he could almost feel his dad beside him, that wild grin from the mantle photo lighting up the night. Tina skied up, her run finished just after his and stopped short, her breath puffing white. "Not bad, rich boy," she said, her voice sharp but her eyes narrowing like she was sizing him up. "Didn't he think you had it in you?" Jake shrugged, still grinning, too buzzed to care about the jab. But the high didn't last. By midnight, the video was everywhere. Jake's run, shaky footage from some kid's phone, blasting across Pine Hollow's patchy cell network. It hit the town's Facebook page, racked up likes from the diner crowd, even got a share from the hardware store owner with a caption, "New King of Timberline?" Jake didn't see it until Saturday morning, sprawled on his bed, scrolling his cracked phone while Maggie banged around downstairs, oblivious. He grinned at the screen, replaying the clip his turn, the spray, the shout until the bedroom door flew open. Maggie stood there, her face white as the snow outside, her phone clutched in one hand, a dish rag in the other. "What the hell is this?" she snapped, holding up her screen. The video played, tinny and loud, Jake's run looping in her shaking grip. "Timberline? You went behind my back after I told you no?" Jake sat up, the grin fading. "Mom, don't mom me." Her voice cracked, sharp and raw, and she stormed in, tossing the phone onto his bed. "You think this is a game? Sneaking out, racing down that damn hill like him? You have any idea what you're doing?" She was trembling now, her hands balled into fists, and Jake saw it again, that fear, deep and wild, flickering in her eyes like a trapped animal. "It's just a race," he shot back, standing to face her. "I'm good at it, Mom. Ray says I've got Dad's fire, why can't you let me have that?" "Because it's not safe," she shouted, loud enough to rattle the windows. "You don't get it, Jake, you can't be out there. Not like this." She stopped, catching herself, her breath ragged, and for a second, he thought she'd say more, something real, but she just shook her head, turning away. "You're grounded. No slopes, no Ray, no nothing. And those skis are gone permanently." She left, slamming the door, and Jake stood there, fists clenched, the video still looping on her phone. He grabbed it, shut it off, and sank onto the bed, the note burning a hole in his pocket. She wasn't just mad, she was terrified, and he didn't know why. But he wasn't stopping. Not now. Across town, Maggie locked herself in the bathroom, the only place Jake wouldn't hear her cry. Her phone buzzed on the sink. Victor again. "Famous kids don't last long, Maggie. Shut it down." She stared at the screen, tears streaking her face, and whispered, "I'm trying, you bastard. I'm trying." But the walls were closing in Victor's threats, Jake's defiance. The past she couldn't outrun, and she didn't know how much longer she could hold it together. Meanwhile, at the diner, Tina Hayes scrolled the video again, her jaw tight. She declocked Jake's time faster than hers. Damn it, and the comments were all about him. "New kid's a natural," one said. "Miller's got moves," another. She tossed her phone onto the counter, the clatter drowned out by the jukebox playing some old Johnny Cash tune. Her grandpa, Old Man Hayes, shuffled over, his cane tapping the linoleum, and leaned on the counter beside her. "He's trouble, that Miller boy," he rasped, his voice like dry leaves. "Mountain's got a way of claiming folks who shine too bright. Happened to his daddy, mark my words. It'll happen again." Tina frowned, brushing her braid back. "He's just some rich kid with fancy skis, Grandpa. Nothing special." But she didn't believe it, not after that run. Something was up with the Millers, and she was damn sure going to find out what. The weekend bled into Monday in Pine Hollow, the kind of cold, gray Monday that made the town feel like it was holding its breath under a sky too heavy to lift. Snow flurries danced lazily outside Jake Miller's bedroom window, sticking to the glass in fragile patterns before melting away, but he barely noticed. He was sprawled across his bed, one leg dangling off the edge, staring at the ceiling where a water stain from last spring's leaks spread like a dark, jagged map. His phone sat silent on the nightstand. He muted it after the 10th text from kids at school, all buzzing about his Timberline run. "Dude, you're a legend. Saw you kill it next round, S on you." The video had spread beyond Pine Hollow now, popping up on Instagram with grainy hashtags like #PineHollowSlalom and #NewKing, racking up likes from strangers he'd never meet. Felt good, that rush of being seen, but it didn't. Not with Maggie's voice still ringing in his ears, sharp and panicked. "You don't get it? Jake, you can't be out there." She made good on her threat. The skis, Tom's skis, were gone by Saturday night. He heard her rummaging downstairs after their fight, the clatter of the closet door, the thud of something heavy being dragged across the hardwood. By Sunday morning, the lock was back on, tighter this time, a shiny new padlock that glinted like a dare when he checked it. He pounded on her bedroom door, yelling until his throat hurt. Where do you put them, Mom? They're Dad's, not yours. But she stayed silent, the only sound her pacing behind the locked door, her shadow flickering under the gap like a ghost. Grounded. Didn't he even cover it? She taken his phone for the day, cut the Wi-Fi, and left him stewing in a house that felt more like a prison than ever. He gotten the phone back this morning, slipped under his door with a curt school tomorrow, behave, but the skis were still MIA, and that gnawed at him worse than anything. Downstairs, Maggie moved like a machine, mechanical, precise, every step calculated to keep the chaos at bay. The kitchen smelled like bleach and burnt toast, the chili pot scrubbed raw and stacked in the drying rack, the counters wiped down until they gleamed under the fluorescent light. She'd been up since dawn, cleaning, cooking, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from spiraling. Jake's run played on a loop in her head, the video, his shout, the way he looked so much like Tom tearing down that hill, and every frame twisted the knife deeper. She'd seen Victor's text again last night, after Jake had gone to bed. Famous kids don't last long, Maggie. Shut it down. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a deadline, and she could feel it ticking, every second a step closer to losing him. She stashed the skis in the attic crawlspace, behind a stack of old boxes. Tom had labeled winter gear in his sloppy scrawl, and triple locked the hatch. But it wasn't enough. Nothing felt enough anymore. She poured herself a coffee black, no sugar, the way she liked it since Tom died, and stood at the sink, staring out at the backyard. The apple tree swayed in the wind, its bare branches clawing at the sky, snow piling up around its trunk in uneven drifts. Her phone buzzed on the counter, a low hum that made her flinch, and she grabbed it, expecting Victor's cold bite. But it wasn't him. It was a local number, Nick Russo, the nosy reporter who'd been sniffing around town for weeks, asking about old mining permits and irregularities in county records. The text read, "Mrs. Miller, saw your son's run. Quite a talent. Can we talk about Tom's accident? I've got questions, think you've got answers." Her stomach dropped, coffee sloshing over the rim as her hand shook. She deleted it, blocked the number, and set the mug down hard enough to chip the edge. Nick wasn't just a pest, he was a bloodhound, and he was getting too close. The doorbell rang, sharp and sudden, cutting through the quiet like a gunshot. Maggie froze, her pulse spiking, and glanced at the clock. 8:47 a.m. Jake was still upstairs, sulking or plotting, and no one in Pine Hollow dropped by this early unless it was trouble. She wiped her hands on a dish rag, smoothing her hair back, and crossed to the front door, peering through the peephole. A man stood on the porch, tall, broad-shouldered, in a tailored black coat that screamed money, his dark hair slicked back, a faint smirk playing on his lips. Victor Slade. Her heart sank into her boots. She'd known he'd come eventually. Those texts were never just threats, but not here. Not now. Not with Jake awake upstairs. She opened the door a crack, the cold rushing in, and kept her voice low. "What do you want, Victor? This isn't the time." He didn't wait for an invitation, pushing past her into the foyer with a casual arrogance that made her skin crawl. The smell of his cologne, sharp, expensive, like cedar and leather, hit her first, followed by the faint creak of his polished boots on the hardwood. "Nice place, Maggie," he said, glancing around, his voice smooth as ice. "Cozy. Doesn't quite match the bank account, does it?" He turned to her, that smirk widening, and pulled a chess pawn from his pocket, a black one, glossy and cold, rolling it between his fingers like a toy. "You've been slipping, darling. That video's got half the county talking about your boy. Talent like that draws eyes I don't need on us." Maggie shut the door, her hands trembling as she locked it, and faced him, keeping her voice steady despite the panic clawing her throat. "He's done with it, Victor. I stopped him, grounded him, took the skis. It won't happen again." Victor chuckled, a low, hollow sound, and stepped closer, the pawn clicking against his rings. "Oh, I'm sure you tried. But kids are stubborn," takes after his old man, doesn't he? "Tom was a problem too, until I fixed it." He paused, letting the words sink in, his gray eyes boring into hers. "You remember that day, don't you? Clear blue sky, perfect powder, then boom. All that snow coming down just for him. Took care of my little mining issue real nice. But Jake? He has a loose end, Maggie, and I don't like loose ends. Her breath hitched, the room tilting, and she gripped the edge of the console table to steady herself. She could still hear it, the rumble of the avalanche, the crack of the ridge splitting open, the radio static when the sheriff called to say Tom was gone. Victor had been there that week, inspecting the slopes, his crew poking around the old mine shafts Tom had been hired to survey. She hadn't known then, not until later, when the money started flowing and Victor showed up with contracts and threats that it wasn't an accident. He'd blown the ridge, buried Tom, and pinned her under his thumb ever since. Yes, just a kid, she whispered, her voice breaking. Leave him out of this, I'll do whatever you want. Victor tilted his head, studying her like a chessboard, then stepped closer, his boots inches from hers. What I want is silence, Maggie. No slopes, no races, no spotlight. You keep him in line, or I'll bury him literally this time. And you'll watch just like you watch Tom go. He flicked the pawn into her hand, cold and heavy, and turned for the door. Clock's ticking, darling. Don't test me. He left, the door clicking shut behind him, and Maggie sank to the floor, the pawn slipping from her fingers to roll across the hardwood. Her chest heaved, silent sobs shaking her as the weight of it crushed down Victor's chains. Jake's defiance, the past she couldn't escape. She didn't hear Jake on the stairs, didn't see him peering down from the landing, his jaw tight, the note crumpled in his fist. He caught the tail end Victor's voice, the threat about burying him, and it lit a fire in him, hotter than the race, hotter than anything. He slipped back to his room, grabbed a backpack and started packing screwdriver, flashlight, the note. He was done waiting for answers. Across town, Tina Hayes clocked out of her diner shift, her apron stained with ketchup and coffee, her braid fraying from a long morning. She'd seen Victor's SUV roll through earlier, sleek and out of place among the rusty pickups, and it bugged her. She knew the Millers were loaded, everyone did. Even if Maggie played it down, but that guy? He wasn't local, wasn't some friendly investor. She slipped into the back, where old man Hayes sat nursing a mug of tea, his gnarled hands wrapped around it like claws. Grandpa, you ever hear about a guy named Victor Slade? She asked, leaning on the counter. He squinted up at her, his eyes cloudy but sharp. Slade? Yeah, big shot from Denver way back. Poked around the mines before they shut down, same time Tom Miller went under that snow. Folks said he was bad news, Tina. Mountain didn't like him, still doesn't. You watch yourself around that one. He tapped his cane on the floor, a slow, deliberate rhythm, and muttered, claims what it's owed. That ridge does. Tina frowned, her mind churning. Jake's run, Victor's car, the whispers about the Millers, it was all connected, and she was damn sure it wasn't good. She grabbed her skis from the break room, the patched-up pair she'd scraped together from thrift stores, and headed out. She wasn't racing Jake again, not yet, but she'd be watching. Back at the house, Maggie dragged herself to the kitchen, splashing cold water on her face, the sink dripping in time with her ragged breaths. Her phone buzzed again, another unknown number, but she didn't check it. She couldn't. Upstairs, Jake zipped his backpack, slipped on his boots, and cracked the window, the cold rushing in as he climbed out onto the roof. He wasn't grounded anymore, he was gone, and the storm was just beginning. Jake's in deep, can Maggie save him? Tell me below and don't miss out. The cold bit deep into Pine Hollow as dusk settled over the town, painting the sky a bruised purple that bled into the jagged peaks of the mountains. Snowflakes twirled down in lazy spirals, catching the faint glow of streetlights along Main Street, where the diner's neon sign buzzed and flickered, casting a pinkish haze over the drifts piling up outside. Jake Miller dropped from the roof of his house onto the snow-covered lawn, landing with a muffled thud that sent a puff of powder into the air. His backpack jostled against his shoulders, the screwdriver and flashlight clanking inside. The crumpled note from his dad, the Ridge S&T safe, tell Maggie, burning a hole in his pocket. His breath fogged in front of him, quick and sharp, as he pulled his hood low and darted toward the tree line behind the house, the pines swallowing him into their shadows. He didn't look back, not at the warm glow of the kitchen window, Not at Maggie's silhouette pacing inside, oblivious to his escape. He couldn't. Not after what he heard Victor Slade say, "I'll bury him literally this time." That wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. And Jake wasn't waiting around to find out what it meant. His boots crunched through the snow, the sound swallowed by the wind whistling through the branches. A low moan that made the hairs on his neck prickle. He heard Victor's voice before, faint and muffled through the floorboards when Maggie thought he was asleep. Late night calls, hushed arguments, but seeing the guy in their house, standing there like he owned it, flipped a switch in Jake. The guy wasn't just some suit from Denver. He was dangerous, tied to his dad's death somehow, and Maggie was scared enough to lock Jake in. Scared enough to cry when she thought he couldn't hear. But she wouldn't tell him why, and that lit a fire in him hotter than the Timberline run, hotter than anything. He needed answers, and he knew where to start. Ray Carter. The hike to Ray's place took him through the back trails, a maze of narrow paths he explored as a kid, frozen streams snaking under ice, pine needles carpeting the ground, the occasional deer track cutting through the snow. The air smelled sharp, wet earth, pine sap, and the faint tang of wood smoke drifting from town. Ray lived on the edge of Pine Hollow, in a sagging trailer parked beside a gravel lot littered with rusting car parts and stacks of firewood. The trailer's windows glowed yellow, curtains drawn tight, and the faint hum of a generator buzzed from the back. Jake slowed as he approached, his boots crunching on the gravel, and hesitated at the rickety steps leading up to the door. Ray had been Thomas' best friend, knew him better than anyone, but he dodged every question Jake ever asked about the avalanche. Focus on the slope, kid. Past a slippery thing. Slippery, sure, but Jake was done sliding. He knocked, the hollow thud echoing, and the door creaked open a crack. Ray's weathered face peered out, his graying hair sticking up like he just rolled out of bed, a cigarette dangling from his lips. "Jake?" he rasped, squinting through the smoke. "What the hell you doing out here? Your mom know you're gone?" "No, and she's not gonna," Jake said, stepping closer, his voice low but firm. "I need to talk to you, Ray. Now. About Dad and that guy Victor who showed up at our house today." Ray's eyes narrowed, the cigarette bobbing as he chewed his lip. He glanced over Jake's shoulder, scanning the dark, then yanked the door wider. "Get in here before you freeze your ass off." Jake ducked inside, the trailer's warmth hitting him like a wall, stale cigarette smoke, burnt coffee, and the faint must of old carpet. The place was a mess. A sagging couch piled with blankets, a card table cluttered with empty beer cans, a tiny TV flickering with a muted football game. Ray kicked a stack of newspapers off a chair and pointed. "Sit. You want coffee? Looks like you're half dead already." "I'm fine," Jake said, dropping his backpack and sitting, the chair creaking under him. "Just tell me what's going on, Ray. I heard Victor threaten me, said he'd bury me like he buried Dad. And Mom's freaking out, locking everything up, acting like the mountain's gonna kill me too. What's he got on her? What happened to Dad?" Ray froze, the cigarette halfway to his mouth, then sighed, long and heavy, like he'd been holding it in for years. He stubbed it out in an ashtray shaped like a trout, the ash crumbling, and sank onto the couch, rubbing his hands over his face. "Damn it, kid," he muttered. "I knew this'd come up someday. Should V figured you'd be the one to dig it up." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and fixed Jake with a look tired, haunted, but steady. "All right, you want to know? I'll tell you what I can. But it ain't pretty, and it ain't safe." Jake nodded, his throat tight, and Ray started talking. "Your dad Tom was more than just a skier. He was smart, too damn smart. Worked as a surveyor for the county back in the day, mapping the ridges, checking the old mines. That's how he met Victor Slade, big shot from Denver. Rolled into town with cash and promises. Said he'd reopen the shafts, bring jobs back to Pine Hollow. Tom signed on to scout the sites, thought it'd be good for the town. Good for you and Maggie. But he found something up there, something Victor didn't want anyone knowing." "What?" Jake pressed, leaning forward, the chair creaking louder. "What did he find?" Ray hesitated, his jaw working like he was chewing on the words. "Evidence. Maps, samples, proof the mines weren't just shut down for profit. Victor S. crew was digging illegal stuff, rare minerals, shit worth millions, off the books. Tom figured it out, started asking questions. Next thing I know, he's telling me the Ridge ISNT stable said they'd been blasting too close to the fault lines, risking a slide. He wanted to tell Maggie, get her to help him go public. But Victor got wind of it. That avalanche? Wasn't no accident, Jake. They blew the Ridge, buried Tom and the evidence in one shot. I was supposed to be with him that day, damn near was, but I bailed last minute. Been carrying that ever since. Jake's stomach twisted, the trailer spinning around him. You're saying Victor killed him? And Mom knows? She didn't at first, Ray said, voice dropping. After Tom died, Victor swooped in, offered her money. Said it was insurance from the county. Some bullshit story. She took it, grieving, scared, raising you alone. By the time she figured out it was hush money, he had her hooked. Controls her accounts. Her life keeps her quiet with threats. I tried to get her out once, years back, but she wouldn't budge. Said it'd put you in the crosshairs. Guess she was right. Jake stood, pacing the tiny space, his boots scuffing the carpet. So that's why she's freaking out about the slopes, why she locked me up after Timberline. He's scared I'll dig it up too. He stopped, turning to Ray, his fists clenched. We've gotta do something, Ray. Tell someone, the sheriff, the papers. Slow down, kid. Ray cut in, standing to, his voice sharp. Victor S. got half the county in his pocket, sheriff included. You think I haven't tried? Only reason I'm still breathing is I kept my mouth shut. But you're right, we can't just sit here. That video got his attention, and he ain't gonna wait long to make good on that threat. Before Jake could answer, a sharp knock rattled the door, loud and insistent. Ray swore under his breath, grabbing a baseball bat from beside the couch, and motioned Jake to the back. Hide now. Jake ducked behind a curtain partitioning the tiny kitchen, his heart pounding, as Ray cracked the door. Tina Hayes stood there, her braid dripping snow, her patched skis propped against the trailer steps. Her face was flushed, eyes wide with something between anger and panic. Ray, we've got a problem, she said, shoving past him before he could stop her. Jake Escon crawled out his window, left tracks heading this way. And that creep Victor S. goons are sniffing around town, saw M at the diner, asking about him. What the hell is going on? Ray shut the door, locking it, and glanced at the curtain. Might as well come out, kid. Cat S outta the bag. Jake stepped forward, backpack slung over one shoulder, and Tina's jaw dropped, then tightened. You? She snapped, crossing her arms. What were you doing here? Running from mommy or just stirring up more trouble? Both, Jake shot back, meeting her glare. And it's not just my trouble anymore. Victor S. after me, threatened to bury me like he did my dad. Ray just told me everything about the mines, the avalanche, all of it. Tina's eyes flicked to Ray, then back to Jake, her stance softening just a fraction. Wait, what? You're saying that slimebag killed Tom Miller? My grandpa's been muttering about that ridge for years, said it was cursed, claimed folks who got too close. I thought he was just spinning yarns. He wasn't, Ray said, setting the bat down, his voice grim. And now Jake S. on Victor S. radar. That Timberline run put a target on his back, same one Tom had. Tina paced, her boots scuffing the floor, then stopped, turning to them. Okay, fine. I'm in. If this guy S coming for you, he S coming for Pine Hollow, my home too. Grandpa S got an old map, mine shafts, back trails. Said Tom gave it to him before he died. Told him to keep it safe. Might be something there we can use. Jake nodded, a spark flaring in his chest. Hope. Maybe, or just desperation. Then we get it. Tonight, before Victor S. goons figure out I'm gone. Ray grabbed his coat, tossing Jake a spare. All right, but we move fast. Tina, you lead, your grandpa's place is closest. I'll drive. If we're doing this, we're doing it together. He paused, looking between them, his jaw tight. And Jake, your mom's gonna kill me for this. But I owe Tom. Let us make it right. They piled into Ray's truck, the engine coughing to life, headlights cutting through the snow as they peeled out of the lot. The trailer faded into the dark behind them, and Jake gripped the note in his pocket, the words echoing in his head. An alliance him, Ray, Tina, unlikely as hell, but it was something. The storm was closing in, and they were running out of time. Snow fell thicker over Pine Hollow as Ray Carter's truck rumbled down the back roads, its headlights slicing through the swirling white, casting eerie beams across the pines that flanked the narrow trail. The old Chevy groaned with every bump, the suspension creaking under the weight of 3 tense passengers. Jake Miller in the front, clutching his backpack like a lifeline. Tina Hayes wedged beside him, her patched skis rattling in the footwell, and Ray behind the wheel, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, cigarette smoke curling from the half-open window into the frigid night. The dashboard clock glowed 7:32 p.m., its green digits flickering with every jolt. But time felt slippery out here, like the storm was bending it around them. The wind howled outside, rattling the truck's loose panels, and Jake swore he heard that whisper again, keep going, faint and fleeting, lost in the roar of the engine. Tina's grandpa, Old Man Hayes, lived a mile out of town, in a squat cabin tucked against a rocky outcrop near the old mining trails. The place was a relic, logs weathered gray, a sagging porch piled with snow, a single bulb flickering over the door like a tired beacon. Ray killed the engine, the sudden quiet heavy, and the 3 of them spilled out into the cold, boots crunching as they trudged up the steps. Tina didn't knock, she shoved the door open, calling out, "Grandpa, it's me, got company." The air inside hit them like a wall, wood smoke, stale coffee, the faint must of old books and damp wool. The cabin was small, cluttered with decades of junk. A wood stove crackling in the corner, shelves sagging under mason jars and rusted tools. A faded quilt draped over a rocking chair where Old Man Hayes sat, his cane propped against his knee. He looked up, his cloudy eyes narrowing as he took in Jake and Ray trailing behind Tina. His face was a map of wrinkles, etched deep from years in the mines, and his voice rasped like dry gravel. "What's this, then? Miller boy and Carter, huh? Trouble's brewing if you're here this late." He shifted, the chair creaking, and tapped his cane on the floor. "Spill it, Tina. Auntie got all night." Tina dropped her skis by the door, brushing snow from her braid, and crossed to him, her voice low but urgent. "Grandpa, we need that map, the one Tom Miller gave you. You always said he left something with you before the avalanche. Jake's in deep, some guy named Victor Slade's after him, and we think it's tied to what happened back then." Old Man Hayes froze, his hand tightening on the cane, then leaned forward, squinting at Jake. "You're Tom's kid, all right. Got his fire, saw it in that timberline run. But you're stirring a hornet's nest, boy. That ridge don't forgive, and neither does Slade." He paused, chewing his lip, then nodded slow. "All right, wait here." He shuffled to his feet, leaning hard on the cane, and disappeared into a back room, the floorboards groaning under his weight. Jake paced the cramped space, his boots scuffing the worn rug, the heat from the stove doing little to chase the chill in his bones. Ray lit another cigarette, the flare of the match casting shadows across his face, and muttered, "Hope the old coot's got something worth a damn. Victor's not sitting idle, he'll have eyes out by now." Tina shot him a glare but said nothing, her arms crossed tight, her jaw set like she was bracing for a fight. Old Man Hayes came back, a rolled-up map clutched in his gnarled hands, yellowed and frayed at the edges. He spread it on the table, shoving aside a stack of fishing magazines, and pinned it down with a mug and a rusted wrench. The paper crackled, ink faded but legible hand-drawn lines snaking through the mountains, dotted with XS and scribbled notes. "Tom brought this to me a week before he died," Hayes said, his voice low, reverent. "Said he'd found trouble up on the ridge mines Victor's crew was working off the books. Showed me samples, some shiny rock, worth a fortune, he reckoned. Told me to keep this safe, said he'd explain later. Never got the chance." Jake leaned over the map, his breath catching as he traced a line marked Ridge 7, the spot where Thomas' avalanche hit. A note in his dad's handwriting sat beside it. "Blasting detected unstable. Tell him." There it was again, "Tell Maggie." "This is it," Jake said, voice shaking. "Proof Victor blew the Ridge killed Dad to cover it up." "Why didn't you tell anyone, Hayes?" The old man's eyes darkened, his cane tapping the floor. "Tried, boy. Took it to the sheriff, old Pete Grayson, back then. He laughed me off, said I was seeing ghosts. Next day, my truck's tires got slashed, and someone left a dead crow on my porch. Victor's way of saying shut up. I ain't had the fight in me since kept it hid till now. Ray stubbed his cigarette out on the table, ash scattering, and leaned in. That's why he's got Maggie on a leash, money and fear. She must figured it out after, but he's been holding this over her ever since. He tapped the map, his finger landing on a circled spot near Ridge 7. Look, access shaft B. Tom marked it. If there's evidence left, it's there. Tina grabbed the map, folding it quick. Then we go tonight, before Victor's goons catch up. Grandpa, you got that old lantern in the shed? Hayes nodded, pointing a shaky finger toward the back door, and she bolted out, snow swirling in behind her. Jake's mind raced, the pieces clicking into place. Victor's threats, Maggie's panic, the note. We find that shaft, we got him, he said, turning to Ray. Proof Dad didn't just die, it was murder. We can take it to someone outside Pine Hollow, someone he can't buy off. Ray nodded, grim but resolute. Risky as hell, kid. But yeah, let us do it. Tina's right, tonight's our shot. He grabbed his coat, tossing Jake a wool cap from the couch. Bundle up, it's a hike, and that storm's picking up. Tina burst back in, a dented kerosene lantern swinging from her hand, its glass cracked but intact. Got it. Grandpa, stay put, we'll be back. Hayes waved them off, muttering, mountainous watching. Kids, don't piss it off, as they piled out into the night. The trek to Ridge 7 was brutal, 2 miles uphill through knee-deep snow, the wind slashing at their faces, the lantern's weak flame flickering in Tina's grip. Ray led, his boots carving a path, while Jake and Tina followed, skis slung over their shoulders for the descent. The pines loomed taller here, their branches bowing under the weight of the storm, and the air grew thinner, colder, every breath a sharp sting. Jake's legs burned, his damp hoodie sticking to his skin, but he pushed on, the map's promise driving him. Halfway up, Tina grabbed his arm, pointing through the trees. Look, lights. 2 beams bobbed in the distance, headlights, creeping along a parallel trail. Victor's crew hunting them. Keep moving, Ray hissed, picking up the pace. They reached the ridge an hour later, a steep, rocky spine jutting from the mountain, snow piled high against a sheer drop. The shaft was hidden, a rusted grate half buried under drifts, marked by a splintered sign. Shaft be condemned. Ray kicked the snow aside, wrenching the grate open with a groan of metal, and Tina lit the lantern, its glow spilling into the dark. Inside, the air was damp, heavy with the smell of earth and rot, the tunnel sloping down into shadow. Jake went first, the lantern casting jagged shapes on the wall's crumbling rock, old timbers sagging under decades of neglect. Tina followed, her breath puffing white, and Ray brought up the rear, muttering, "Hope this don't cave in on us." They moved slow, boots slipping on loose gravel, until Jake spotted it, a metal box wedged into a crevice. Rusted but intact, Thomas' initials scratched into the lid. Tim. He pried it open, hands shaking, and pulled out a stack of papers, maps, photos, a notebook scrawled with Thomas' notes. Blasting logs, January 15th, confirmed illegal. VS ordered detonation. Evidence buried, shaft B. A baggie of shiny black or tumbled out, glinting in the lantern light. This is it, Jake whispered, his voice echoing. Proof he killed Dad. Before they could move, a shout cut through the tunnel, gruff, close. They're in here. Footsteps pounded, shadows stretching up the walls. Victor's goons, 2 of them, big guys in black coats, flashlights blazing. Tina swung the lantern, smashing it into the first one's face with a crack of glass and a howl of pain, oil spilling across the floor. Ray tackled the second, fists flying, but a third figure loomed, Victor himself, stepping into the light, a pistol glinting in his hand. Nice try, kids, he said, voice cold as the snow outside. But this ends now. He aimed at Jake, the barrel steady, and the tunnel went silent, the storm raging above as the truth and the danger closed in. Jake's in deep, can Maggie save him? Tell me below and don't miss out. The tunnel under Ridge 7 felt like a tomb as Victor Slade's voice sliced through the damp, frigid air. His pistol gleaming in the flickering light of the spilled lantern oil that hissed and sputtered on the rocky floor. Jake Miller stood frozen, the rusted metal box clutched to his chest, Thomas papers and the shimmering black or spilling from its edges, proof of his dad's murder trembling in his hands. The tunnel walls loomed close, crumbling stone and sagging timbers dripping with moisture, the air thick with the smell of earth, rot, and the sharp tang of kerosene. Tina Hayes crouched beside him, her breath puffing white in the cold, shards of the broken lantern still gripped in her fist like a weapon, her dark braids swinging as she glared up at Victor. Ray Carter wrestled with one of the goons a few feet back, grunting as fists met flesh. The second thug sprawled unconscious from Tina's swing, blood trickling from his nose onto the gravel. The storm outside roared louder now, wind howling through the shaft's open grate, rattling the mountain like it was waking up. Victor stepped closer, his polished boots crunching on loose rock, the pistol steady in his gloved hand, his tailored coat brushing the tunnel floor. His smirk was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating stare, gray eyes glinting like steel under the faint light. "You've got guts, kid," he said, his voice smooth but edged with venom, every word deliberate, like a chess player moving his final piece. "Digging up the past like this, thought you'd play hero, huh? Just like your old man. Pity he didn't learn his lesson, either thought he could outsmart me, take my little operation public. Look where that got him." He tilted his head toward the tunnel's shadowed depths, a mocking nod to the avalanche that had buried Tom Miller a decade ago. Jake's heart pounded, loud enough to drown out the wind, but he didn't flinch, his fists tightening around the box. "You killed him," he spat, voice raw, shaking with a fury he'd never felt before. "Blew that ridge to cover your tracks, buried him, and left us with nothing. And now you're scared 'cause I found the proof." He held up the notebook, Thomas' scrawl stark against the yellowed page vs order detonation, and shoved it toward Victor like a blade. "It's over, Slade. You're done." Victor chuckled, a low, hollow sound that echoed off the walls, and took another step, the pistol's barrel hovering inches from Jake's chest. "Over? Oh, darling, you're a long way from checkmate. That little scrap of paper's nothing without you to wave it around, and you're not walking out of here. None of you are." He glanced at Tina, then Ray, who pinned the goon to the ground, breathing hard, blood streaking his knuckles. "Cute team you've got, Carter, the washed-up skier with a guilty conscience, and Hayes, the scrappy little diner rat. Shame you dragged them into this. One avalanche took Tom, another LL take you. Mountain's good at keeping secrets." Tina lunged, swinging the lantern shard at Victor's arm, but he sidestepped, quick and smooth, and slammed the pistol's butt into her shoulder. She stumbled back with a grunt, hitting the wall, the shard clattering to the floor. "Stay down, sweetheart," Victor snapped, his calm cracking for a second before he turned back to Jake. "Now hand over that box or I put a hole in you right here. Your choice." Jake's mind raced, panic clawing at him, but he didn't move. He could feel the weight of his dad's legacy in his hands, the maps, the notes, the truth, and letting it go meant letting Tom go, letting Victor win. "No," he said, voice steady now, defiant. "You want it? Come take it." Victor's eyes narrowed, his finger tightening on the trigger, then a shout echoed from the tunnel's mouth, sharp and desperate. "Victor, stop!" Maggie Miller burst through the grate, snow swirling in behind her, her coat flapping open, boots slipping on the icy rock as she stumbled into the light. Her face was pale, streaked with tears and melting flakes, her dark hair plastered to her cheeks, but her eyes burned with a fire Jake had never seen. She held a crowbar in her shaking hands, gripped like she'd swing it if she had to, and her voice trembled but didn't break. "Leave my son alone, you bastard. You've taken enough." Victor turned, the pistol wavering, surprise flickering across his face before the smirk returned. "Maggie, darling, perfect timing. Come to watch the show? Or did you finally grow a spine?" He stepped toward her, casual, like she was a minor inconvenience, but she swung the crowbar, a wild arc that grazed his shoulder, forcing him back. "I said leave him alone," she screamed, her voice cracking the tunnel's silence, raw with a decade of grief and rage. You killed Tom, turned me into your puppet. Threaten my boy, I'm done. Victor, shoot me if you want, but you're not touching Jake. She lunged again, the crowbar whistling through the air, and Victor dodged, cursing as he stumbled over the unconscious goon. Jake seized the moment, shoving the box at Tina. Hold this, and tackled Victor from behind, his skinny frame slamming into the man's legs. They hit the ground hard, gravel biting into Jake's knees, the pistol skittering across the floor. Victor roared, twisting to grab Jake's hoodie, but Ray was on him, wrenching his arms back with a growl. Stay down, you son of a bitch. Tina scrambled up, clutching the box, and kicked the pistol into the shadows, her shoulder throbbing but her eyes fierce. Maggie dropped the crowbar, rushing to Jake, pulling him off Victor and into her arms, her breath hitching as she held him tight. Jake, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, she sobbed, her hands clutching his face, checking him over like he might vanish. I should V told you should V fought him years ago. I was so scared he'd take you too. Jake hugged her back, his own tears stinging, the anger melting into something softer, something broken. Mom, I found it. Dad's proof. He didn't just die, he was trying to stop this guy. He pulled back, nodding at the box in Tina's hands, and Maggie's eyes widened, fresh tears spilling as she realized what it meant. Before they could say more, headlights blazed through the grate. Another SUV, tires crunching snow, doors slamming. Victor laughed, hoarse and bitter, still pinned under Ray. Too late, Maggie. My boys finished this. Nice try, though. But the footsteps pounding down the tunnel weren't his goons. They were lighter, frantic, and a voice cut through the chaos. Drop it, Slade. Hands where I can see 'em. Nick Russo burst in, a flashlight in one hand, a phone in the other, its screen glowing as it streamed live Pine Hollow expose. Corruption on the ridge, the feed already racking up views. Behind him, 2 state troopers in heavy coats leveled their guns, badges glinting in the lantern's dying light. Victor Slade, you're under arrest. Murder, conspiracy, illegal mining. Got it all on tape thanks to these kids. He nodded at Jake, Tina, and Ray, then Maggie, his voice sharp but steady. Troopers were tracking your goons, caught 'em on the road. It's over. Victor's face twisted, fury boiling over as the troopers cuffed him, dragging him up. You think this ends me? I own this state. He snarled, but his voice cracked, the smirk gone as they hauled him out, his goons stumbling behind, dazed and bleeding. The tunnel fell silent, the storm's roar softening as the adrenaline drained away. Jake sank against the wall, Maggie beside him, her arm around his shoulders, the box of evidence clutched between them. Tina leaned on Ray, wincing at her shoulder, but a grim smile tugged at her lips. Guess we're not dead yet, she muttered, and Ray chuckled, wiping blood from his lip. Nick crouched beside them, shutting off the stream, his face flushed with exhaustion and triumph. Got a tip from a source in Denver, been chasing Slade for years. That video of your run, Jake, stirred the pot enough to get eyes on Pine Hollow. When I saw you sneak out tonight, I followed, figured something big was breaking. Didn't he expect this? He tapped the box, grinning. This bury him, court eat it up. Maggie looked at Jake, her eyes soft, broken open. I should trusted you, she whispered. Tom tried to warn me, left that note, begged me to listen. I was too scared, thought keeping quiet would keep you safe. I was wrong. Jake shook his head, squeezing her hand. You came, Mom. That's enough. He glanced at the tunnel's mouth, the snow falling thick, and swore he saw it again, a shadow on the ridge, tall and still, watching. Dad, maybe, or just the mountain letting go of its ghosts. The troopers escorted them out, the storm easing as they climbed into Nick's truck, the evidence safe, Victor gone. Pine Hollow lay quiet below, its secrets spilling open at last, and Jake felt it, the weight lifting, the truth breaking free, the storm finally breaking. The weeks following Victor Slade's arrest rolled over Pine Hollow like a slow thaw after a brutal winter. The snow kept falling, blanketing the town in a quiet that felt different now, less oppressive, more like a pause before something new. The storm that had raged over Ridge 7 faded into memory, leaving behind a bruised sky that cleared bit by bit, revealing the jagged peaks of the Colorado mountains in sharp, crisp detail. Main Street buzzed with a cautious energy pickup trucks rumbling past the diner, kids sledding down the hills behind the gas station, the neon sign over Pine Hollow Hardware flickering back to life after a week of shorting out. But beneath the everyday hum, the town was shifting, its secrets unearthed, its wounds laid bare. Victor S. face had been plastered across every news outlet from Denver to Durango. Corrupt official busted in small-town mining scandal and Pine Hollow. For once, wasn't he just a footnote on a map? Jake Miller stood at the edge of Timberline Hill, the same slope where he raced that fateful night, his breath fogging in the crisp morning air. The sun hung low, casting a golden glow over the snow, turning the drifts into a sea of glittering white that stretched out toward the ridge in the distance. He wore a new jacket, thick, navy blue, a gift from Ray after his old hoodie got shredded in the tunnel, and Thomas' skis rested beside him, propped in the powder, the carved TM. Catching the light, they'd been recovered from the attic crawl space, handed back to him by Maggie with a quiet, tear-streaked nod the day after the troopers hauled Victor away. She hadn't locked them up again, hadn't even tried. Something had broken open in her that night, and Jake felt it too, a crack in the wall they built between them, letting light seep through. The Timberline amateur slalom was back on, rescheduled after the chaos, and today was the big day. The hill buzzed with life, locals stomping paths through the snow, kids dragging sleds and shouting, a rickety wooden stand selling hot cocoa and burnt hot dogs near the bonfire that crackled at the base. The start gate had been rebuilt, Ray's handiwork, sturdier now with fresh planks and a coat of red paint that stood out against the white. A crowd was gathering, bigger than before, folks from town, sure, but also reporters from Denver, their cameras clicking, drawn by the story of Victor's downfall and the kid who helped break it. Jake didn't love the attention, every flash made him flinch, but he couldn't deny the buzz in his chest, the mix of nerves and pride that hummed under his skin. Maggie stood a few yards back, bundled in a thick coat, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug from the stand. She lost weight since the tunnel, her face sharper, her eyes shadowed from sleepless nights spent talking to lawyers and state investigators who descended on Pine Hollow like vultures. Victor's arrest had unraveled everything, the money he funneled through her accounts, the mining deals he buried with Tom, the threats that had kept her silent. She handed over bank records, emails, every scrap of paper she kept hidden, and the feds had taken it all, seizing the fortune she never wanted. The house was still theirs for now, but the wealth was gone, and Maggie didn't seem to care. She started working shifts at the diner, pouring coffee and flipping burgers beside Tina, her hands steady despite the whispers from old-timers who still saw her as the rich widow. "Keeps me busy," she told Jake last night, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Keeps me here." He caught her eye now, and she nodded, a small gesture that carried more than words. She'd come to every practice since the tunnel, standing in the cold with Ray, watching him ski, cheering when he nailed a turn. It wasn't easy, there were still fights, still silences, but it was something, a start. She told him everything over late-night coffee at the kitchen table. How Tom had begged her to leave Pine Hollow before the avalanche, how Victor had trapped her after, how she stayed quiet to keep Jake safe. "I thought I was protecting you," she said, voice breaking. "But I was just hiding. You're braver than I ever was, kid." He hugged her then, the first real hug in years, and felt the past shift, not gone, but lighter. Ray trudged up beside him, his boots crunching, a thermos of coffee in one hand, the other clapping Jake's shoulder. "Big day, kid," he said, his voice rough but warm, cigarette smoke curling from his lips. "Crowd twice what it was last time, damn near a circus. You ready?" His wool cap was pulled low, his face still bruised from the tunnel fight, but his eyes sparkled with something like pride. "Yeah," Jake said, adjusting his gloves, the leather creaking. "Gotta finish what I started, right?" He glanced at the skis, Tom's legacy under his feet, and Ray nodded, slow and deliberate. "Damn right. Your dad be front row, hollering louder than anyone." Probably drag us all out for a midnight run after. He paused, taking a swig from the thermos, then handed it over. You've got his fire, Jake. Don't ever lose it. Tina Hayes skied up, her patched gear rattling, her braids swinging as she stopped short, kicking up a spray of snow. Miller, she said, smirking, don't choke out their wooden tea when I beat you too easy. Her shoulder was still stiff from Victor's hit, but she refused to sit out, training harder than ever. They weren't rivals anymore, not really. After the tunnel, she stuck around, helping Ray clear the trails, swapping stories about the ridge over diner coffee. She even apologized, sort of guess you're not just some rich punk, and Jake had laughed, the first real laugh since it all went down. Keep dreaming, Hayes, he shot back, grinning, and she rolled her eyes, shoving off to warm up. Old man Hayes watched from the sidelines, his cane sunk in the snow, muttering about the mountainous ghosts finally resting. Nick Russo was there too, his camera crew filming B-roll, his exposé now a full-blown documentary, The Ridge Reclaimed, set to air next month. He tracked down more evidence in Denver, tying Victor to a dozen other scams, and the state was moving to shut down the illegal mines for good. The race started with a crackle from Old Man Hayes' megaphone, the crowd roaring as the first skier, a lanky kid in a Broncos beanie, shoved off, weaving through the flags with wobbly grace. Jake was up fifth, and when his name echoed over the hill, Jake Miller, the noise swelled, cheers mixing with camera clicks. He stepped to the gate, skis clicking into place, the wind tugging at his jacket. The slope stretched out steep, familiar, alive, and he took a breath, feeling Tom in the air, in the snow, in the rhythm of his heartbeat. Go! Hayes barked, and Jake launched, the world narrowing to a rush of white. He carved the first turn tight, snow spraying, the crowd a distant roar. His knees flexed, weight forward, cutting through the flags like he'd been born to it. The second turn came fast, then the third, each one smoother, faster, the skis humming under him like they knew the way. Halfway down, he hit a rise, launched into the air, and landed clean, the jolts singing through his legs. The finish line loomed, a blur of faces and firelight, and he blasted through, skidding to a stop with a shout that tore from his chest, snow flying in a wild arc. The crowd erupted, whistles, yells, kids chanting Miller, Miller, and the scoreboard flashed. Third place, a bronze medal, half a second behind Tina, who'd taken silver. She skied over, punching his arm. Not bad, rookie. Next year, you're toast. He laughed, breathless, as Ray and Maggie closed in. Ray clapping his back, Maggie pulling him into a hug that smelled like coffee and diner grease. For you and Dad, Jake said, pressing the medal into her hand, and her eyes welled up, her smile shaky but real. You earned it, kid, she whispered, and for once he believed her. Weeks later, spring crept in, melting the snow into muddy streams that ran through Pine Hollow. Jake, Ray, and Tina opened a free ski school at Timberline Miller's Ridge Runners, funded by donations from Nick's viewers, a patch of land reclaimed from Victor's empire. Maggie volunteered, patching kids' jackets, pouring cocoa, her hands steady now. The ridge stood quiet, its scars healing, and one evening, Jake climbed it alone, standing where the shaft had been sealed. The wind blew soft, carrying a whisper, good run, son, and he smiled, the mountain reborn under his feet. Jake's on top. What's this win mean to you? Comment and subscribe.